I have a confession to make. I have a little bit of an obsession with geese. Or rather, not just geese, but trying to get the perfect picture of geese in flight here at this reserve. And autumn time is when I try and do this. At this time of year, the geese are just more active, they're more reliable, and you get more flight opportunities. Now, I've been watching them for a number of years, and I've figured out various places where I can get close to their flight paths. Now, I've got some really good images over the years, and including this autumn so far as well. I've got some really lovely flight shots, and they're nice, but that's not entirely what I'm after. I want something with atmosphere, I want something a bit different, and for me that really means trying to get them in the early morning mist. Obviously the mist is going to look fantastic in your photos, but shooting at that time you're also going to be in blue hour, where you're just going to have that lovely blue cast before the sun comes up. I think particularly if it's a clear sky as well. And that for me is almost as good really. It's atmospheric and it kind of has this, oh I don't know, this cool eerie cast to it. The geese have a pretty reliable timetable. So at this time of year they'll leave the water, they'll go to the surrounding fields to feed, which I think is usually like on the stubble fields, and then they will come back to the water. And then they do this at the beginning of the day around sunrise and at the end of the day around sunset. So they do it twice a day. Now, from scouting, doing the research, you've got to put in the hours and watch, scouting locations, I've found pretty good flight paths here on the reserve where I know it's pretty reliable. The birds are going to fly and use those flight paths, really big flocks of geese. So my job is to try and get a little bit closer. I mentioned in a previous video about flight photography that one of the things you want to do is to try and get more level to the birds if possible, because then you're not looking upwards, the light's better, you're going to be closer, everything's just going to be better. So I've been looking for those locations where I can get more level with the birds, and what that really means is just trying to get close to them at takeoff. So if I can find the geese on the water, and I know they're going to take off and I can get closer, then I'm going to be at the right level, and if you get in the mist, everything is going to be perfect. So where I am now, this is a really good spot, and it's pretty much on the general flight path that the birds take when they go out to feed. Now it does mean that the sun is behind me in the morning, which is when I want to shoot. Now that's okay, it's nice to shoot into the mist, it can be really, you get some really dramatic images that way, but shooting into the mist when you've got the sun behind you can also work really well. Just if you've got that kind of bluish mist, just a touch of sun can make all the difference, as I look at a great crested grebe. Wind is massively important when it comes to flight photography. I mentioned this in previous videos. Now here what happens with the geese is they generally fly in this direction, which is towards the east when they go out to feed. Not always, but a lot of them, I know for a fact, will fly in this direction, east. Now, if the wind is coming from the west, which is the usual prevailing wind in the UK, then it means they're going to take off that way. Almost certainly they're going to take off that way, away from me. And then what happens is they're going to kind of circle round and they're going to come back this way in the direction that they want to go. The problem with that is when they circle round, they start to get higher. They gain more height as they come back round. They're already getting quite high in the sky, which means again I'm pointing upwards. So what I've done is try to find locations where I can get a little bit higher, like where I am now. There's a couple of these I can get higher up, which already gets me closer to the geese at a similar level, and it's worked really well. I'm still kind of shooting upwards, but just not quite as much. So it's really been a case of just searching those locations, anywhere that's higher, that's a little bit raised, and there are a few of them, some higher than others. I've just been checking them all out, testing them all out, looking at the angles, looking at the direction of light, looking at the backgrounds, and thinking, does it work or doesn't it? However, if the wind is coming from the east, coming from that way in this direction, then the geese are going to fly into the wind to the direction that they're wanting to go. In that case, I can actually get down lower in order to try and get my flight shots around that initial takeoff. Like everything though, it's not an exact science. The conditions are just absolutely amazing this morning. I would say just about perfect. Right amount of mist, and it's on today. The shot I'm after is really on. I just need that little bit of luck. I just saw something flying towards me. I thought that looks a bit different, that looks bigger. Is that a marsh area? Yes, it was. Didn't come quite close enough, but I got oh, geese. And that's why you shouldn't mess around and take your eye off what you're trying to concentrate on. I've got a few images I am really happy with from this season I'm going to put up on the screen for you now. This one in particular, I really do like this because it has got some nice mist in the shot. Unfortunately, I didn't have any sun coming through at the time because it was so early. But these three geese have just turned round, they've taken off and turned round and flown directly towards me. I really do like the atmosphere to this image. Really slow shutter speed though for flight shots, but sometimes that's good because you get a little bit of movement in the wings, which can be nice. In terms of the technical information, the camera settings, I have a very specific way of shooting in the mist now, and this works really, really well for me. I've done it for probably a good year or two now, stuck to it, and I use Aperture Priority with automatic ISO. It works brilliantly, and I tend to use a fairly wide aperture, maybe the widest aperture on the lens to get in more light, and I also select a minimum shutter speed. That's really important. So I'll select a minimum shutter speed between 1/500th and 1/1000th depending how I feel and which lens I'm using, and then put a maximum on the ISO of 3200 as well. That works absolutely brilliantly. The other thing I do is always add overexposure for the mist, so you always add exposure now of around +1. It's getting busier now, there's loads of people. This lens, the Canon 400mm f5.6, I know it's a very, very old lens. There are better lenses, there's faster lenses, but this still is a really, really good buy in my opinion, and I think it's great for flight photography. So I'll use this sometimes for flight photography of the geese. The problem is, when they're active, particularly in the morning, being active in really, really low light sometimes, so they tend to go out to feed actually before the sun comes up, so the light levels are just ridiculously low, and the problem with this is that the focus is just not that fast in low light, so trying to shoot the geese in very low light with this is difficult. So in that situation I might opt sometimes for the bigger lens, the 500 f4, because it is faster focusing, it'll pick them up better in those conditions. The only problem with that of course is that it's just so heavy, so it's much harder to hand hold and keep everything steady. There's never a perfect answer. There is another section of the reserve where I can shoot, which is actually on the western side, so I can be shooting towards the sun first thing in the morning, again trying to get that mist, but shooting towards the sun to get that colour coming through the mist, which can give you the most dramatic shots, and that's fantastic. I had a little bit of success with that. The problem is it's just not as reliable, and it also relies on a westerly wind, because if the birds take off to the east they're just going to fly away from me, so I need a westerly wind, and sometimes they just don't come close enough to do it really. So it is another option, but this one is the one I've been working on recently, and I don't know if you don't live in the UK, you might not know, but sometimes we go for like 2 weeks without any sunshine. It's absolutely horrific. So I'm literally waiting now. I'm almost 2 weeks now waiting for the right conditions just to get mist, just to get a clear morning and to get some mist. Nearly 2 weeks since I had the last opportunity, and that's just the way it is, and that's also a reason why you need to try and make the most of every opportunity and try and nail it every time, which you're not always going to, but you need to try, because here in the UK you just don't know when you'll next get that chance to have a go at that type of image in those conditions. And plenty of other stuff here as well. You know, when I'm waiting for the geese to arrive, I have a good chance of other birds, ducks, swans, cormorants, even spoonbills. I've had some amazing views of spoonbills. The best views I've ever had of spoonbills in my entire life over the last few weeks. Almost every single time I've been here, I've had 1, 2 or 3 spoonbills fly past or even over me. Well, thanks so much for watching. I've really enjoyed this, and yeah, hope you can get out there, try some misty shots for yourself. I'll see you next time.